I'll start caveating questions with under your version of feminism, is this true? Because otherwise I don't know. Mm-hmm. Under your view then, this argument may be moot. Do you think that women ought to have some duties to society?
Some duties in under my worldview, yeah. I think that women should do things that are good for society per my values.
What?
Yeah, I think women should vote.
They should?
Yeah.
Or they should have the right to vote?
Well, I think both things can be true.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm just asking, should they actually go vote? Do you think they should go do that?
Yeah, I think that women, oh my God.
Like, do they have a duty to do that?
That noise is so loud. Do they have a duty to that? Would I prefer them to? Yeah. I would prefer them to go vote.
So they have a duty to vote. Should there be any consequences if they don't vote?
No. Mm-mm.
Okay, so there's no enforcement of any duty there.
No legal consequence, no.
Okay, so then I guess what duties should women have where there's an enforcement behind it? Like, you don't do this duty, there's a consequence.
Yeah, the same types of ones that men have. So if you have a child and you don't take care of it, you leave it malnourished, I think that you have a legal duty to do that. You should be punished in the same way that a man should be.
Okay.
So that's one example.
Okay, so they have some ethical duties. What about societal duties?
Well, that would be a technical societal duties. Maybe I'm not clear what you're looking for.
Oh, I'm just looking for, jury duty's a duty, literally, right? As its name implies. That's like a civic duty or a social duty.
They might have a legal duty to do that. Now, do they have a moral duty? Are they doing something
Correct,
bad
right.
to me?
That's why I'm looking at, is there a distinction there between the ethical and the civic duty? So I'm just asking, what duties do you think women socially should have in society?
Legally or ethically?
Legal, or, well, both, actually.
Well, those are going to be two different answers, right?
Let's start with legally then.
Okay, sure, yeah. I mean, they could be things like legally, I think people should be held to go to jury duty. Legally, I think that people should be, prosecuted for crimes. I think they have a duty not to commit crimes against other people. And that's both an ethical and a legal one. Mm-hmm. But the ones that apply to men generally, too. So I'm not sure what this question is getting at.
Do men have a duty to protect women?
Sure.
Okay.
I think people have a duty to protect other people when they can.
Do women have a duty to protect men?
Yeah, when they can.
When they can, as they can. Okay.
Of course.
And this makes society good, right? Or
yeah,
better.
I think people protecting people, it makes a society good.
Okay. Do women have a duty to not be promiscuous?
To not be promiscuous? Mm-hmm. What do you mean by promiscuous?
Have sex with lots of different partners.
That I'm not sure of. I don't know if people would probably say no.
I'm asking you.
I'm not sure. The answer was I'm not sure.
You're not sure if they have that duty?
Yeah, I'm not sure if they have a duty to society to not, sleep with multiple partners.
Do they have a duty not to do sex work?
That one would hinge on some empirical facts, like maybe if it caused a lot of negative outcomes or something like that, and maybe the benefits didn't override those negative outcomes. That might be one reason why I would say okay, well, they do have a duty not to do sex work.
Do they have a duty to stay with their husband even against their own happiness for the sake of their children?
I would probably say no in a lot of cases.
Why not?
Because I think that infringes on people pretty severely when you're in a scenario like that. There could be some negative outcomes for kids. Once again, that would be an empirical claim. That the answer to that would hinge on some empirical facts.
So if I were to give you empirical facts, and of course, during this little 2-hour debate, it's going to be impossible for you to go through any empirical data I would give you in a very wide overview, right? But if you were given facts then that if women did stay with their husbands, even if they maybe fell out of love with them, they didn't really like him that much anymore, right? Or they really just didn't want to participate in the marriage, but they had children with him, right? And we saw the outcomes for children were way better if they stayed, even if it was at the expense of their happiness. Would you then advise women to stay?
That depends on how much of a toll on their happiness it would take. I think falling out of love with someone...
Let's say it takes a big toll on their happiness.
I'm not sure that that's something I can give you an answer to, whether or not they have some ethical duty to do. That is probably going to be a case-by-case thing. I would have to look at, okay, well, how miserable is this person staying with this person, and how much of a benefit is it going to give their kids? And do they have access to the knowledge of how much benefit it'll give their kids to stay?
So you don't know if they...
I think in the general cases, they don't have an obligation to say, because I think the type of things that lead to divorce are pretty severe. And in a lot of
It's
cases,
usually irreconcilable differences, not severe.
I'm sorry?
Like, I don't think it's severe usually, actually. I think the things that lead to divorce or irreconcilable differences are not abuse. And it's not even money usually. It's just falling out of love. They just don't like this person, or I don't like their habits anymore, or things like this. But
Well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure falling out of love is always reconcilable. In fact, that sounds kind of
not
miserable
asking
to try to force yourself to love
not
someone.
asking it to reconcile and fall back in love, but whether or not they have a duty to stay with their husband for their children, for the sake of their children, because their children get far more desirable outcomes if they do.
Right, but I think that there's probably something like empirically there, like there's probably a lot of distress that it causes somebody to stay with somebody that they don't love and to not pursue somebody that they would in fact love.
I agree. It causes them distress. That's what
Right.
duty does, right?
Yeah,
Sometimes
so
you have
I'm
duties
just
to
making
things
an
which cause you
estimate.
distress. Yeah.
I'm just making an estimate that no, they probably wouldn't have an obligation to do that.
Now, you've dove into the stats then, so that you know probably that when it comes to abuse of children inside of the home of single mothers, are you aware of where that usually comes from?
Where the abuse from single mothers comes from?
For the children.
Sorry,
For the
I'm not
children,
sure what
the
the question
children
is.
in single mother homes, the abuse rates that happen to them, do you know where that usually comes from?
You might just have to give the answer. I'm not sure what you're
Okay,
asking.
so here, easy. Kid gets abused inside single mom home. Who usually abuses them?
I would assume the parent or other siblings.
No, it's usually, see, in these cases, it's most often step parents in single mother homes.
Okay.
Right? Puts them far more prone for abuse and for all sorts of different things. Now, this isn't to say that step parents are bad, because they're not, right? There's tons of great step parents out there. Nobody's making that claim. Only that if you are with your biological partner, right, or the parent, the biological parent of the children, that the rates of abuse drastically decrease inside those homes for those children. Period. Even if the parents stay and they're out of love with each other, they don't even really like each other. You see this often in religious marriages, religious institutions, where they'll stay on behalf of the children. The children's outcomes are generally speaking far and away better.
There,
Really,
yeah. So the problem there is I think there would probably be a data collection problem there. When you have people who are remarried, it's probably easier for kids to report that a step parent is committing abuse versus a biological parent. A child might be more trusting of their biological parents, especially if they're still together. There might be covering up of abuse that's occurring, so that I might have some issues with like gathering that data and actually coming to like a conclusion there. But I would say that
Would something like multiple meta-analyses on that data do something to assuage your doubts?
meta-analyses on the data that says that
Step parents are more prone to abuse than the biological father.
sure, I mean that's fine, but there once again I would need to see that data. I'd have to go through it, see what kind of methodological problems exist there, because I would suspect that the abuse would go a lot less reported, because that's something that you can't account for. If a kid's not going to report it, a kid's not going to report it. But you can make an inference and say like, okay, well, kids are typically more trusting. Kids come out years later and say, hey, my biological parents abused me and I never told anybody. And sometimes they don't even tell teachers.
Well, I mean, a lot of these studies they're going over multiple decades, right? And so is the meta-analysis.
Sure,
going
that
over
doesn't get rid
multiple
of the problem. That doesn't get-
it gets rid of some of those problems, but doesn't get rid of all of them. I agree.
Not the data collection, not the issue. It doesn't make that type of problem go away.
Which
Why
type,
would gathering
which type of problem specifically?
the problem of abuse being covered up or children being more trusting of biological parents?
So that could be the case. I was just talking when you were saying like children could come out later and discuss abuse rates or something like that. It's like, yeah, that's true. But one way that you could compensate for that is to have longevity in your study, following these same people, and then getting back with them 20 years later or whatever, so that you could make these determinations. So that would be one way that you could compensate.
Sure,
for that.
and it might still not fully compensate for it though if that person still is
I don't
more trusting
disagree.
of their biological parent.
Yeah,
so it doesn't fully get rid of that
I don't
issue.
disagree. I was just saying that here there is some things that you could do, but I agree, right? But I would say that a meta-analysis, multiple meta-analysis, that would at least be something you'd look at.
And I want to make it clear, the claim that I'm disputing isn't necessarily that step parents don't abuse their children more than biological parents do. That could be very well true. But what I'm saying is when we do have an issue finding that out, we have an issue of like children trusting their biological parents more. But we also have the issue of like sorry, I lost my train of thought. I'm really thirsty. That might be a good time for a break, but we do have that methodological issue. Over time, it doesn't really get rid of it, though, if children still trust their biological parents more. And it could be the case like parents are covering it up for the other parent, whereas they wouldn't cover it up for like a new spouse or something like that. Mm-hmm. Or they might cover it up to keep the family together. That could also be a case that I would say would cause a lot of issues collecting that type of data.
Okay.
And those reasons the abuse might still not outweigh the type of harm done to the person staying with the person they don't want to be with.
All right.